Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lieutenant Colonel Christopher Manganaro, and on behalf of the Department of Military Science here at Furman University, as well as the Furman Military Alumni Association, we welcome you to today's webinar entitled Entering the Lion's Den, Expectations for Your First Job. Today, this is also, it's a webinar from the Alumni Association. It's also a ever loved and ever dreaded sometimes CLP for the Furman students. So these are some guidelines we're just going to cover up front for those participating, those students participating. This is an unclassified webinar. This is going to be recorded. This is being recorded right now. So topics and things that we'll be discussing about here, especially with military personnel, will just be unclassified. Discussing things about your first job hopefully are unclassified, but we'll keep it at that level. There is a Q&A box on your in your dashboard. You click on that Q&A, you type in your question, hit enter, I'll get that question. And at the end, the format really today is going to be a couple of guided questions at the beginning from both Colonel Marshall and General Pasquarette on the topic we want to talk about. And then at the end, give about 10 minutes or so at the end to take questions and answers from the audience. So if you're out there, especially as the topics, as we're going through some of the discussions we have, if something piques your interest or something that you gentlemen bring up, ask the question and you put it through the Q&A section. Again, from the guidelines, this is a Furman University Cultural Life Program event. It is expected, and again, always display, we've never had a problem that participants display respect for both presenters, and it's twofold, respecting those that have views that maybe differ. So keep an open mind again, allow the new ideas, allow the tips that you might hear today from the years of service, combine both of them, come over 60 years of service. I'll tell you one thing about the military up front. You say, well, you've had the same job. The answer to that question is the three of us here, yes, have had the same employer. We've had a lot of different jobs. And that's maybe one of the great things about serving in the military or serving in an organization where you do change jobs a lot, which means every 2 years or 3 years, you have to meet new people, work with new organizations, figure out the tools, and those things we'll talk about. So just keep an open mind and hopefully you get something out of it today. Okay, again, Lieutenant Colonel Chris Manganaro. I'm the Furman ROTC Professor of Military Science here. I am a logistics officer in the Army, so I fix, feed, fuel, arm, repair, FedEx, DHL, Amazon, you name it, all that stuff for the Army. We still need to do that in a combat zone and get it there. And I'm also here as a Professor of Military Science. I have over 18 years of service. Most of my time overseas has been spent in Afghanistan. I'm a 2004 graduate of Hofstra University up in Long Island, New York. And me, as well as many of my peers and a lot of the Furman graduates in that time frame, went right over to Afghanistan. We spent our time doing that. And love what I do, love being here, love being a paladin. I'm a paladin for life. So once you're here, you're stuck here. But it's a great organization and I love being here. The other two presenters here, we have Lieutenant General James Pasquarette, a class of '83 grad. You can see there where he's what he's done and how he's been. He's a 3-star general. So for those out there that don't know the rank structure, there's a 4-star. So there's a 4 and General Pasquarette is a 3. So very high up there. He's been up there. But it all started here at Furman, and we're going to do an icebreaker here shortly and hear his story of how he started here in Greenville and what he did. And finally, Colonel Rob Marshall, class of 1994. He was here last year, pre-COVID, came down and visited us. He's up in Virginia, working in training, operations, and management for the Army, working on all the Army schools we get to go to. He is, I would say, I don't know, sir, I'm going to paraphrase this, the registrar for the Army, like where you get to go. That was my one, he's the registrar for the Army. So anytime an Army student or soldier wants to go to a school, Colonel Marshall and his team have that slots and put you guys, as I know you all are going to say this, I will say workday. This is the only time I'm going to say workday, which is the student system that you guys are registering for your classes. That's what Colonel Marshall is in charge of. And just double back, I didn't want to say it up front and steal General Pasquarette's thunder, but his current job, Deputy Chief of Staff G8, that is Army code for he's in charge of money and lots of it, sir. You don't need to give us the dollar figure, but General Pasquarette, all the resources and money that help the Army run and help us move, General Pasquarette oversees all of that. So with that, that's just sort of the introduction from my point of view, but I do want to hear what they have to say. So for General Pasquarette, please give us a little bit more of your background, a little bit more about yourself. And again, most importantly, what was your most fondest memory of Furman back in the class of '83, and why is that the most fondest memory of yours? Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, well, thanks, Chris, for what you're doing and for offering me to participate along with Rob. Jim Pasquarette here. Yeah, class of 83 and a 3-star general. What that means is I'm old. And you can see the gray hair probably through the lens here. So background on me is been married for 36 years, have 3 boys. 2 of them are in the family business, the Army. And then a third one is a high school senior, and he just committed to go to KU out at Lawrence, Kansas, University of Kansas. He's all fired up on that. When I was a kid, I played high school basketball in Philly. At the same time, my uncle was an ROTC instructor at Furman. And so he had me down there to Furman to go play, go to the summer camps down there at Furman. And that's how I got to know the campus and the location. So I applied and got in. And while I was there, I remember getting a letter from my mom saying, "Hey, your brother that's a lot smarter than you wants to go to medical school. He was a year behind me. And so we can't afford that. Why don't you go and see if you can get an ROTC scholarship?" And so I went down there. About a week later, I had one. This is right after Reagan got elected, and we were growing the military. And so it was like flash to bang time. I was part of the Army almost overnight and finished up the last 2 years in ROTC at Furman. So in the Army, once I got commissioned, I was an armor officer and tanks, cavalry kind of stuff, and did all those kind of assignments and all my tactical, time out there. But I had a lot of time. Obviously, Rob has the same experience, I'm sure, out away from my basic branch, which was, tank units, doing operational and then high-level strategic assignments, including 5 tours here in the Pentagon. I sit right here in the Pentagon today. Right outside the window behind me is the memorial for the plane hit the building, just so you know that. And then, Army is very big into education. And so I've had the opportunity to get 3 master's degrees over the time together. So I guess my best memories of Furman, I played a lot of intramural sports, really enjoyed that, a little bit of everything. I do remember being terrified my senior year right now in April, because I had a lot of CLPs still to go. And but Furman was good about jamming 2 or 3 a day, and at that point, and I was going to watch lectures and symphonies, all kind of stuff. There were no webinars back then, okay, so you couldn't just sit at home and do it like maybe some of you are today. But I think probably the neatest memory is it was in the fall of '82. It's my senior year, and we were out on a ROTC weekend thing doing a land nav course with South Carolina State somewhere in the woods. Spent the night, Saturday night you spent the night, you got up the next morning, did more stuff. But we came back on campus like late in the afternoon or early evening of Sunday that weekend, and there's huge parties going on off campus. No parties on campus back then anyway. And because we had beat South Carolina in football back then. It was in like October of '82, and that was a good time. That was a big deal. So with that, that's me in a nutshell. I don't know, we'll just go straight to Rob. Chris, is that what you want to do, or?
Yes, sir. No, thanks. I'm just soaking in the Carolina fans. They're like, how is that Furman beat? Yeah, there was a time, everybody, when the Furman Paladins could beat the Gamecocks, maybe even today. Who knows?
In the 80s, Furman was pretty good. Yeah. Okay.
National champions, too, back then. So,
cool.
I'll go right to Colonel Marshall. Same thing, sir. A little bit more about yourself. Thanks, sir, for that. It was good. Some color context. And then, again, fondest memories here. I know you've told us here at ROTC because you were here last year, but kind of share with everybody your kind of fondest memories of Furman.
Sure. Yeah. So I grew up in South Carolina, down in Columbia. My 3 siblings, so I have an older brother, an older sister, and a younger brother, and all of us went to and graduated from Furman. My older brother was a 2-year scholarship. My younger brother had a basketball scholarship. My sister was just smart, so she had other people pay for it. But I was lucky enough to get a 4-year scholarship, because that would have been the only way to pay the tuition at that point. But proud to be a kind of a Furman legacy at that point. I was a bio major, probably the worst in school history. So I think you mentioned you were a bio major too, but I think there's a plaque somewhere in the basement that says the worst bio student ever, Rob Marshall. Married 26 years, 2 teenage boys, a senior and a freshman in high school. I'm a career artilleryman, so I've been in tactical units for the majority of my career, but I've had some teaching jobs. I taught captains for almost 4 years, and I taught the War College as well for some of my peers after my own time. I've done Afghanistan and Iraq, had those experiences. Favorite memory of Furman, other than meeting my spouse, which of course is the most important thing to say when you're talking about members of Furman. I guess when I was a junior, we thought it'd be a super idea to dress up in costumes for morning PT. And that is, I think I still am sore from the smoking we got from the cadre that day. And honestly, it wasn't because we dressed up. It was one of us didn't. And so that was the reason for the retraining that we had. But a fond memory of trying to climb up the rope yet another time, and see just how many push-ups I could do in an hour and a half setting. Yeah, but that's kind of me in a nutshell, as an intro. Back to you, Chris.
No, thanks, sir. No, thank you. That was very much. And yeah, we did do our costume. It was very structured, as you know. So your class, the pain from 1993, 94 was felt. It's been passed forward to 2020. We had a dress up last year. We were not able to do one this year, but it was very structured and everyone dressed up. It was very good. So thank you for that pain and for letting those cadets continue to move on. So good. Well, gentlemen, hey, thank you so much for those intros. I think a lot of that gives people context more about who you are, a little bit more than what's on the screen, and get to know that. So thank you. So again, today we want to talk about expectations for your first job. You can go online, you can Google this. I saw things on Harvard Business Review, Inc.com. Those are great. And a lot of them, most of you are not going into the military. But the one thing we do want to provide, especially the alumni thought about, is providing you some characteristics, some things that we thought would help you, or that we've seen, or that these two have seen that, it applies to whatever you want to do out there. So we're going to go through some questions here, talk about it. If you've got questions for them, please put them in the Q&A. I can already see one in there now. So just put them in the Q&A and we'll take them here at the end. So I want to stick with Colonel Marshall, sir. So just to you, really, so Furman, class of 94, got it. Do you think Furman helped prepare you for the workforce? If so, why? What things from Furman's perspective do you think, A, that you took advantage of, or B, that helped you as you entered the workforce? I know it's probably not CLPs, it might be, but we'll see how we go from there. So over to you, sir.
Yeah, thanks. So I think Furman did a great job, honestly, preparing me to enter the workforce. A lot of people would not believe it, but there are significant intellectual demands of the Army, and it's not just whatever your basic branch is or your specialty, but you end up doing a lot of other things that support the day-to-day operation of the Army, and that takes quite a bit of intellectual flexibility to be able to quickly grasp concepts and move between subjects or topics, and Furman's intellectual challenge certainly helped that. Kind of along with that is you learned how to balance multiple important requirements in school and RTC and work, and then trying to have a personal life in there. So that as well, I think, was a very good primer, if you will, to moving into a job other people are going to be counting on. And then the last thing, and this is kind of specific to RTC, but peer leadership was another interesting thing I think that Furman helped me with, because my peers, through the RTC program, were always challenging me, and providing that intellectual feedback and stimulus. So those three things I think really were three or four things were the things that Furman gave me as I went into the job market.
No, thanks, sir. Yeah, and I think the one thing I'll pull from yours that kind of tie in what you said was the intellectual demand. So Basket Weaving State University or Yoga 101, those are awesome. Those are great things, but I don't see those. I'm looking at the course registrar. There's not a lot of those quote unquote courses here that'll get you there, so that when you're entering into a job, for those of you out there entering a job that this class is really hard here. Well, it's good to have a hard class here. This way you can apply it maybe a little easier in the job. If your job's easier than your college, then you've done well, push there. So General Pasquarette, over to you, sir. Just a few years earlier, class of 1983, but in your perspective for your time, how was Furman's preparation? How was the curriculum? How was the structure, or even just the campus life prepare you for your job?
Yeah, so I mean, I thought Rob gave a really good answer. I have a little different take at it. I think everything Rob said is spot on. But I would say, in general, Furman really didn't prepare me for what I was getting into in a general sense, because it's a very unique part of the workforce, the Army. And so I can't say, I think a lot of other colleges probably did about the same as Furman. So I wouldn't say in a general sense. Now, ROTC gave me the opportunity to be prepared, much more so. But I didn't take advantage of it like I probably could or should have. I wasn't the best ROTC, or wasn't really that committed to it. It was paying for my school. I should have, I was immature, whatever you want to call it back then. I do remember being terrified. When it was the CLP thing, I was terrified. But reporting in my first day at Fort Knox, I still remember, it was 23 August of '83 to the basic course, brand new second lieutenant there, and thinking, wow, I wish I would have been a little more tuned in and a little more serious at ROTC, because I was really clueless on the front end. That's not a good feeling to have. We can talk maybe in the future about what to be ready for maybe when you go into your first job here. I'd say, though, in a general sense, how you were raised as a young person, the values and your character, things that your parents instilled in you, and how you are at your core. Furman can polish that perhaps a little bit, but those are the traits, I think, that you're going to carry into your first job, and that will have a lot to say on how you do, because you're not going to change a lot of that. You need to be self-aware of those traits, I think. But I don't overemphasize, I wouldn't say that Furman made me highly successful or made me prepared for day one in a general sense. It was more ROTC. And I don't think you can blame, though, Furman, if you don't do well. I think a lot of that is a lot of a personal responsibility and things you need to do to be prepared for whatever that opportunity you have is right in front of you. So I'll leave it at that. It's kind of a around the world answer to a pretty good question.
Yes, sir. And I'll peel one thing and give it back to both of you. You, sir, first you, General Pasquarette, because you just brought up. So we have institutes and fellowships and the Furman Advantage and all these other things that people could take advantage of. But what I'm tracking and what I'm aware of is you don't have to. You could just come, take your class, go back to your room, come, take your class, take your Zoom class, take a webinar, and you could just take the experience. And so what I'm hearing from you is a good tip right now, if you're a class of 23, maybe even class of 24 freshmen listening to this, is you do get 4 years. These are your years to kind of broaden. And your experience, I appreciate your honesty, sir. Just, hey, I didn't want to, a lot of it, I kind of thought this is my time to do this stuff. And you felt it in the pit of your stomach, your first day at your first job. So would you say, and I know it's a loaded question, but would you say, looking back, you would have been, take advantage of the things that are here, especially at a school like this, it has all these opportunities for you to do something. And even right now with COVID, trying to do the best I can with those opportunities. And maybe I'd say is as you figure out, as you're going through the years, what you would want to do on that. Go ahead, sir.
Well, I'd say, yeah, I think, the world's a very competitive place. And the real world is going to expect you to be a serious person. And pretty early on that you're making them better through your presence. And so your commitment early on to improve yourself with the time you do have at Furman, I think, is important. So maybe I'll leave it at that. Rob might have a thought on that.
No, sure. I think that's an excellent kind of point. Is that and something I was going to bring up in one of the others is there are going to be expectations from day one. And so this is a time to work towards thinking through how you meet the expectations and what that means to you, and kind of being able to set priorities, and then move out on those.
Yeah, so that's good, and I want to stay on that because I heard priorities. I heard being value added. General Pasquarette mentioned when you show up, are you a value added, or are you a plus sign to the organization, or are you a minus sign? And so far, if you're a senior and you went to school as a kindergartner, you're going to have 19 years of schooling, K through 12 plus 4, almost 19 years of schooling, which has been show up, receive, give back a grade, a paper, a test, and that's your output. Let's flip that on, talk about today's webinar. You're hearing these two gentlemen. There's more to that than that. It's when I go out to my job, I'm going to have to produce, like, instead of sitting in a lecture or sitting in doing a science lab, I'm producing something, a project, fixing a patient, filing a case as a law clerk. Those things you have to produce. So staying on that note, so Colonel Marshall, I want to stay with you for 1 second. So let's go with, hey, what are some helpful tips for recent graduates? As you said, how can you be value added? Again, we're talking every type of job across the globe, but the general things what are some helpful tips for people when they join their first organization? What's some things that they can do to be successful?
Sure. I think, my number one, I think, would be don't undervalue teamwork. Be a good teammate. And that's not to, like I said, don't undervalue your own participation or your own contributions. But certainly in our business, teamwork, it is a team sport. And many times it's a contact sport. But there's very little that any one of us can do that is not in some way, shape, or form team based. The other thing I'd say is look for help. To your peers. Don't be afraid to kind of work through things. There are some expectations, but being new, there's a little bit of freedom in that as well. So when opportunities arise, you have to kind of seize them to be moving forward, kind of improving yourself all the time. There was an expectation that I would perform immediately based on my education, based on the Army schools. But at the same time, I was appreciated in the team for being a hard worker and being part of the team. So I think, it's good to know what you're getting into, but you're not going to know everything about what you're getting into. Constantly learning and looking for those opportunities is something I would say is probably ubiquitous and the same across no matter what field you decide to go into. And even if you're self-employed, there's some of that.
No, thanks, sir. I'm just going to segue right into General Pasquarette. Sir, helpful tips. We heard teamwork and things like working through problems, but asking for assistance from Colonel Marshall. Anything else you can add, sir?
Yeah, I think it's important. This is really getting into the meat of the discussion I think we should have today with everybody. I'll talk about like coming into a new job on the front end, and then like the tips for pitfalls or whatever. I'd say first, no one, I don't think, when you show up somewhere new, it's certainly true in the Army, but I imagine out in wherever you go, they're not going to really care where you came from, where your degree came from. So all that's behind you, and you can't rest on that. That all helped you get the job you have. At that point forward, forget about it. It's about how you do from day one. And in the Army, I thought there was this, if you were a West Point graduate, you're obviously on the inside track to a great career compared to ROTC guy or officer candidate school. I've not seen that once from the minute I was in the Army. Everybody is the same. So what you've done in the past is gone and nobody cares. So hanging up your Furman diploma in your office the first day, probably, maybe there's a tip there. Maybe don't do that. I'd say some pitfalls and tips. Right off the bat, and probably Rob, you both have seen it there, Chris and Rob, some brand new lieutenants, when they show up their first unit, they hadn't realized they're not in college anymore. And they act like they're still college kids. I use the term kids because that's how they're at when they were in a profession at this point. And there was an expectation, especially after 9/11, we were deploying into tough places, that from day one, you are committed to what we're doing. And there's no time for the silliness that happens sometimes as a college student. I think you have to realize too that any organization you come into that you're joining, they're going to have their own culture, their values, their norms and traditions, their quirks. And I think you need to be self-aware of that. You have to do some research about what those are and how do you fit into that. Some are very good about being an individual and how you want to act and do and see and feel and look. That's fine when you show up. In the Army, it's not. We're about conformity. We wear a uniform. We have certain expectations. Some of them are written down. Some of them are just not. But like, you don't see a whole lot of officers that have facial hair at all, like mustaches. You stand out as an officer with a mustache, in not a good way. And it's not written. You can have one, but you just got to realize, and you don't want to be unaware that you look kind of silly with one. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It's just how it is. You'll find that in your organization, and you don't want to be, unaware of what those norms are, expectations, unwritten rules from day one. So it's talking to people. They'll help you with it if you ask. If not, you might be looking a little bit out of step with everybody else while you are on as you join the team. As an example, I had a lieutenant. And when I was a battalion commander, a tank battalion, and he was a good lieutenant. I really liked him. But he came in, we were talking one day, and he was telling me, "Sir, I have this tattoo campaign plan. This payday I'm going to get one here, and next payday, and by 2 years from now, I'm just going to look great." I say, "Well, let's think about this. How many officers do you know? You're enlisted, man. You see a lot of enlisted guys running around with tattoos all over the place. Nobody blinks at it. But if your goal is to make a go at the Army and maybe make it a career, you might want to rethink this, because you're going to stand out in not a good way." And again, it's an unwritten rule, but so that's just an example of something that may be personally important to you that might not fit into that employer when you join their team. So I would just do some research, as I said, so that make sure you know that before you show up. Last thing I'd say is West Point did do a study about 10 years ago, maybe, on what were those things they wanted to instill in cadets so that when they showed up in the Army to their first organization, what did they have? What are these kind of values that they bring into it? And it was the 3 C's of competence, commitment, and character is what they're doing, what they were working on. And while they have these cadets there at West Point, how do they inculcate that into them so that when they are released onto the force from day one, that first unit, they bring that in? What basically, if you boil it down, and I think this applies not just in the Army, I think any employer would want this. When it comes down to the 3 C's, so it's, that number one, you're committed. You're joining their team. They've hired you. They're taking a risk on you to bring you in. And so they want to make sure that this isn't a job. This is a profession. And they expect you to act like that from day one. The next is that you're competent. Now, it's not, maybe that's not from day one, but they expect you to be a quick learner. They're not having to retrain you on things that are pretty basic to them, because they're going to want some output, as Chris and Rob, I think, has already talked about. Most important, though, is character of the 3 C's. Acting and comporting yourself with high moral character. You'll always do the right thing, even in a tough position or a tough decision. That is valued more than you probably appreciate. So if you have those 3 things and you carry that in from day one, I think you're probably off to a pretty good start. Over.
Nice, sir. Colonel Marshall, anything you want to add on to what General Pasquarette said?
No, I will agree certainly with his character, and I was going to bring some of that up in one of the other points. But as General Pasquarette said earlier, some of that is what you learned as as you were growing up. But your character is evolving, and it should always be moving towards a better direction. But I think the three C's are pretty enduring and not respective of what field you go into. And I think being intellectually curious and having a presence about you is something that and demonstrating a presence are something that will serve you well no matter what field you go into.
No, thank you both so much. I wrote this down. The two things I wrote down, you pull out as well too, sir, was not in college anymore. And there are some unwritten rules. And both of those, let's go back to the current graduating class of 2021, all of online right now, class of 2021. I know from my seniors, at least the experience I've experienced as a professor and commander here, is they were sophomores. They got to have freshman and sophomore year, still growing up. Junior year was cut short, go to Zoom, go online, COVID, come back, we're in this hybrid environment, come back, we're doing this, and then graduate. And there's things that are missed with not being on campus or being able to do those activities. So just like the Y2K, that's the thing that happened back in 1999, 2000, just so you're tracking history lesson. They thought that our computers were not going to work because the numbers ended at the 9 and there was no zeros and they thought everything was going to crash. It's called Y2K. Look that up. Maybe we'll do a CLP next year on Y2K. Everyone thought it was going to end. And by the way, when it flipped over to 2000, we were okay. Same thing with the 2008 recession. All these times where we've had these hiccups, the graduating class, there's been studies done that the graduating seniors or people that are graduating high school and college at times of, call it recession, call it times of toughness, have actually had more resilient careers because they've been able to say, hey, I need to be competent. I can't be in college anymore. I can't take another year or two to figure out what I'm doing. I've got to, like these two gentlemen are saying, I've got to just get in and start looking to my left and look to my right and figure out what's going on. You can do that digitally. You could look at how your organization that you're going to go work in, what are the unwritten rules about attire? What is the unwritten rules about the dog walking behind you? Is it closed off as quiet, or can the kids I have married with 3 kids. Can my kids be jumping on right now, playing with the computer? I don't know. Whatever your organization allows, if it's unwritten that it should be quiet, nobody on there, and your child is like putting crayons, think about that as far, those are sort of those unwritten rules, attire, time, what time management looks like, and work through that. So thank you both for kind of peeling that onion back, because you're not going to get told must show up to work 10 minutes early, must be clean shaven. These are things that, if you work at a beard shop, then you need to have a beard. So it's difference there. Okay. I liked hearing both, hey, some tips and some pitfalls. And I also want to talk, because maybe some people on this webinar will be entrepreneurs. I think Carl Marsh said, we have a huge, Furman has got a huge entrepreneur wave coming out of here. A lot of great graduates. Somebody on here is probably going to run a business one day I might work for. I don't know, but entrepreneurs out there, you're going to be a leader. So you're already stepping in and being a leader. The graduates of ROTC, we throw you in and you're already in charge of 40 to 50 American lives. Like as a 21-year-old graduate of Furman, you already are in charge of people as an officer. So let's talk about kind of some leadership styles. And I'll go to General Pasquarette first on this one. So, hey, sir, so from a leadership perspective, some people may be leaders and they don't even know. Maybe they'll be in charge of like one extra person. But what are some leadership styles for being a new employer, being new into an organization? What are some leadership styles that you have seen have worked well, whether you personally or you are under or have seen around your peers that have worked well? And then counter that. I always like countering to help. What leadership styles that have you not seen work well for people coming into a new organization as a leader? Over.
Yeah, so a couple of thoughts on that. I haven't led a bunch of organizations like I'm sure the colonel and lieutenant colonel here at this point. I'll tell you, leadership is for me personally anyway, it evolves over time. You do get experiences and you change your leadership style based on your experiences, and you take something from everybody you work for that you're being led by, good and bad, what you don't want to be like based on how you've been led by somebody, if you ever have the opportunity that guy has, or some really, wow, this is, I want to emulate this person because I think he really connects with people, or whatever the aspect of it was. So I'm a much different, and plus different jobs require different types of leadership. I think when I was down at the low level as a company commander or something, there's a lot of direct leadership. You're not telling somebody, you're not giving folks a lot of latitude of what to do. It is, you're going to go there to this point on the map and you're going to do that. Do you understand? When you get higher up, it's more strategic. You have a vision. You're trying to move an organization from where you are today to in the future, and you have strategy and all those things, and you give people a lot of latitude as long as they understand your intent. So that's in a broad sense. But if you talk about maybe some traits on leadership, I made a quick list here. First, I think most important is to be empathetic as a leader. If you're going to lead people and be effective, I think you have to realize what it's like to be in their shoes. In the Army, you've been in their shoes probably. If you're so we've got that ability to be empathetic because you've already done that job of the folks you're leading in many cases. But I think in any job, being a leader around whatever you do, is being empathetic of what the situation is of the people you're leading. I think makes you more effective. Along the same line as being compassionate, we got to realize everybody out there has things going on that you don't see or hear. When somebody brings a problem to you, you can't blow it off. That's going to affect your ability to be, in ways you don't appreciate on the here and now. And a lot of the next thing is humility. I think the more rank you get, there's some that start to believe the efficiency reports about them, not realizing they're all inflated and they're cut and paste from other folks. And but some folks lose humility the higher up you get. So on the front end, it's easy to be humble because you have to be. You don't have any bona fides to be much more than a humble person on the front end. But I would keep you wary as you're successful when you move up. If you can continue to be humble, I think it's a mark of a very good leader. I think you got to be tough but fair. That is the expectations. You can't play favorites, but you got to have a hard line. And this is just you make the hard calls. Everybody respects that. It's when you're not consistent on things and folks are trying to guess what you're going to do, not knowing what your standards are, etc., is where it's frustrating for those that you lead. I think being a good communicator is incredibly important, regardless if you're leading one person or a huge organization. There's different ways to communicate, but if you're not careful, you'll go a long time and you haven't talked to the people you're leading. You're so busy on other things outside your organization that the folks you are leading are uninformed, and it has a lot of bad second and third order effects. Being a good listener, I think, is important. You're not the smartest guy in the room often. I know I'm not as the 3-star when I walk into something, but I know who is, and I'm going to tee that person up and listen to that person. Or when he has something he wants to tell me, you got to put your pride aside and not be worried about being that smartest guy in the room. Last couple things I think is being steady in every situation. This gets maybe more into military leadership, but you'll see it too. You'll be under a lot of stress at some point. And if that stress manifests itself in you being, flying off the handle or making a rash decision or doing something, that's where steadiness is really matters. And for those that lead, they're watching every step on how you deal with stressful situations. And then last, and I think Rob said this, really important is to be a good teammate. It's transparent. If you are, for those that are watching you, above you, if you're trying to get up on a peer of yours by going behind them or stealing an idea they had or whatever, but it's transparent, it's noticed. And I think leading an organization, you like to see somebody that's helping a buddy out, even though it's not in your job jar. If you're helping that person who's got a lot going on and could use a hand, that is appreciated. So I'll stop it there, but I think it's a really important topic to have a discussion about. I'll push back to you, Chris or Rob.
Yes, Colonel Marshall, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So I think the first thing is to be authentic. So General Pasquarette talked about that your leadership style is going to evolve. It's going to change, and different jobs require you to emphasize different pieces of or different aspects of leadership. But you need to find your way and bring that out. Kind of adapt to your situation, to your organization, because as General Pasquarette said, people will know if your motives are not genuine, and it's very hard to follow somebody who you don't believe is authentic. You believe they're trying to be something they're not. It impacts trust, which is one of our certainly our foundational and I think many organizations foundational tenets. I would say humility is a key to kind of caveat of or extend what General Pasquarette said, and that's intellectual humility. As General Pasquarette said, it's good to be confident in what you know, but I think you'll know more if you consider that there may be that many people have value and have intellectual points to make. And then the last thing I'd like to say is on his communication point. So as important it is for folks in your organization to be communicated with, if you cannot receive feedback, receive input from those around you, then you're at an information decrement, because there are, particularly as you move into organizational leadership, you can't be everywhere. It's pretty easy in direct leadership to be at the point of the spear, but when you've got 50 spears and they're all doing real important things, that feedback and the ability to take people's point of view, understand, and then adjust, really will serve across any type, both from direct organizational or strategic leadership, and across any organization. I think I think I agree that you're going to change. You're gonna take experiences. You're gonna take new knowledge, new information, and you're gonna adjust. You're gonna find people that you say, well, that I liked that piece. I liked the way that leader did this. The trick is figuring out how you do whatever he or she did that you liked. So it is emulating. It's not imitating the positive that you see. And then the other side of the coin is you're going to have leaders that you don't like some things about the way they do things. But it's real easy to take some of those bad habits on, particularly if they might give you an initial edge up in efficiency or effectiveness, but they're not healthy long-term leadership techniques or traits or behaviors. So you have to be on guard all the time to figure out, okay, what can I emulate, and then what do I want to make sure I steer clear of, whether it's a value or a norm, because I don't think that's a good way of doing business. Back over to you.
Yeah, no, sir. Thank you so much. The one follow-up, because I connected two things together, was the humility. And going back to what General Pasquarette, you said about hanging up your Furman degree, right, up on the wall, hanging up your fraternity sorority letters up on the wall, hanging your favorite sports team up on the wall. Look around. If not everybody else has got the sports team hanging up, don't be the first person to put the sports team up. All three of us have been in organizations where the day that person shows up, they start hammering in. You're like, what's that noise? And there goes like Steelers fan or Giants fan. You're like, oh, okay, yes, hi, nice to meet you. Before you can even say hi, I know what your sports team is. I know what, all that stuff. So just look around. And then part of that's being approachable. So I got that from both of you, being approachable. And I think I've already got two questions. We'll take a Q&A, but go figure, the questions we're asking from the class of 2020 have to do with online. Like, how do I connect with people? How do we do this versus in person? So we'll talk that at the end here. So General Pasquarette, quick follow-up on you said being steady and not flying off the handle. Can you go into more detail about, we are a generation we operate and function through our phones, through our digital leadership means. How have you seen that? How have you personally seen that? How is some of your subordinates? How are your sons who are in the military? How are they dealing with that digital leadership coming into their first job? Are people are people cleaning up their Instagrams? Are they making sure their social account looks good? I mean, what are some tips or things that you've seen? And Colonel Marshall, I'll ask you the same question too from that. Over.
Yeah, so I got two boys in the Army. One's a captain. He's an armor officer about to take command of a cap troop. And then I got a sergeant staff. He's about to be a staff sergeant. He's an airborne infantry guy in the airborne brigade. Both doing great, but getting two different perspectives. Yeah, they're very digitally smart compared to their dad. I can't send them an email to get a response. I have to text them, kind of thing. And I know how to text, but it's, I'm a little different or older, and so I'd say a couple of tips on flying out the handle on digital stuff is something to think about. Is the best advice I think I've ever gotten is, before you hit send, you might want to set the phone down or walk away from it, think about it. And you really want, is this better done face to face, or is this something you want out there forever? I can't remember a time ever that I took that walk or slept on it and came back and say, wow, I am glad I did not send that. I was not thinking very clearly, or I was just pissed off and I was about to let them know it on an email or a text or something. And it's better to go face to face to somebody when you just really have a problem with the issue at hand. So that's one thing. But I would say, again, back to communicating, it's different than what I'm used to. And but I'm at least self-aware. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It's just different. I think when you get into your first job, it's important to figure out, how does your boss like to receive information? What are they comfortable with? And you need to conform to that. You're not going to bend them to, well, I only like text. That probably won't be a good first step. So understanding how to communicate, whether it's email, face-to-face, text, some other means, I think is important, and be able to support what the person you're working for wants to see. Back to you.
All right, sir. I like that. And before I go to Colonel Marshall, I moved all around. I was in St. Louis, Missouri, U.S. Transportation Command, big headquarters, lots of civilians, lots of people working stuff, moving stuff across the globe. Our phones weren't accessible. Our phones were, locked up because we were in a secure location. So most of us have worked in places where I don't have a cell phone, and you communicate via email or this thing called a phone or this thing called walking around. Came here to Furman University. I show up. My wife is taking my son to soccer practice, and the parents go, "Hey, do you have Group Me?" And I'm like, "Group who?" And then I show up here to Furman. Cadets like, "Oh, sir, we're on Group Me." I'm like, "What's Group Me?" And so Group Me is just a glorified group text message system. And so I conformed, like you said, sir. I figured out the environment. I am on Group Me. I'm on Group Me with the cadets. And so you just got to know what that is. My next job I go to, we may not have Group Me. I'm not going to say everybody will do that, but that's the norm. That's what we do here to communicate. So living that life, sir, as we're continuing to grow. So we're soccer moms and Furman. We are on Group Me, just tracking that. So Colonel Marshall, over to you, sir. From a digital leadership perspective, first job, thanks, sir, for giving us that feedback on, don't tell your boss how you talk. Understand what your boss is, how they talk, and then communicate that way. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah. Well, I do have a general rule of don't text or email angry. I will on occasion, have some righteous indignation when something comes across that, from somebody, the higher headquarters is always the bad person. But like I said, if you find yourself typing and you're hitting the keys just a little too hard, or your thumbs are getting sore, take a minute. Like General Pasquarette said, saved email is a better thought out email. Many times if I do succumb to the temptation to send to write an angry email, when I read it over after some time, I always say, well, that's something I shouldn't say, and there's a lot of deleting. There are so many cues that are lost in digital communication. You can't tell the timbre of somebody's voice. You can't, all caps is not something that everybody does. And the simplest thing written in an email can very easily come across to somebody else differently. It's always read 3, 4, 5 times. If you have somebody who can be that honest broker for you, that's always a good thing, because you don't, message sent is not always message received, particularly in digital, the digital world. I've had some tech savvy bosses and some bosses that were not tech savvy, and you do have to adjust to that. And equally as important is, how do you communicate with someone who is younger than you? Now, coming into a new job, that may not be important, but if you want to stay in that job, it will be important eventually. And so being able to adjust and redefine your competencies as a communicator is very important. You know, as far as flying off the handle, it eventually will erode trust to the point where you're not going to be followed. You know, even morbid curiosity eventually peters out. You know, a steady, even keeled, and that is not to say that you have to deadpan everything. It's okay to be passionate, but you have to let your intellect rule over that passion and control it. The difference between passion and emotion. You know, people need to know when you think something is important. Like I said, if you were unpredictable, or you know, personally attack people based on bad things happening, you're going to lose a steady stream of folks that count on you, and eventually they just won't seek you out anymore. And then you've lost effectiveness as a leader.
Oh, thanks, sir. And that's the right thing. So maybe the guy who hung up the Steelers stuff the first day he showed up to my unit, maybe we didn't talk to him for about 2 weeks. I'm just saying, a lot of Giants fans, my wife's a Ravens fan, so don't put Steelers up in my house. Not good. So it was like, oh, okay, we'll talk to you later. No, I'm just kidding. But okay. Gentlemen, thank you so much. We want to go to, we got a couple Q&A questions. Please stay on till the end. We'll be done at 1:30. You know the Army. We're good at starting on time and ending on time. So we got a few more minutes. But two questions that came up I want to pull through and talk through from the group. The first one that came in was talking about COVID, talking about getting a job out of COVID, or your experiences of people showing up in the digital world. I think we maybe could talk about some stuff you've already talked about, but the question that was asked was, how do you fit into an organization when you don't get to see the people in person? So I know class of 2020 may fall into that, but I think word has gotten out to the class of 2021 that they may show up and never meet General Pasquarette in person. It just might be via Zoom. It might be via an email. And I think you're giving them some tips, like not all, communicate clearly, don't be upset. So can either one of you kind of take that one and talk about what are some tips that you're seeing from hires or people that have come onto your team during the COVID time that you haven't met, you haven't done the coffee, you haven't done the walk and talk and stuff like that. Can one of you take that one? Doesn't matter.
So if you don't mind, I'll jump on that one.
Go ahead, Rob.
We've been teleworking in my directorate pretty much from the outset, and we were able to do that. And I've had several folks come on during the pandemic. So the first thing I'd say is, if it's at all possible, you need to make that time to meet face to face. They're just things that you can't do digitally, but you got to be smart about it. There's no sense in incurring unnecessary risk with somebody's health or your own for that. So something I do fairly regularly is I'll cold call people on Teams. And it's funny, the first couple of times I did it, the response I got when it popped up was, "Sir, what's wrong?" It's like, nothing's wrong. I just want to call. Hadn't talked to you in a bit. Just want to see how, because it is a big adjustment. Some people, they need that human interaction, extrovert, introvert, whatever. They need that human interaction to kind of power them, to fuel them. And they don't necessarily get that. But when you reach out point to point, particularly if you can see somebody's face, it's a decent analog. It's not a perfect analog. It's a decent analog. And it shows that you do, in fact, and care. And my boss does that same technique to me. He will reach out, whatever. He can call my cell. He can call me on Teams. And he will do that just to make sure he's plugged in to what I'm thinking and what I'm doing. There's a lot of trust that he gives me, but he's got to make decisions that are based on what I'm doing, and I've got to make decisions based on what he's doing. So I think just being deliberate and not just kind of letting things happen. This is important. Well, figure out the way. Maybe that person needs to be FaceTime. Maybe that person needs to be, whatever whatever other means you can do to have a little bit of face-to-face, even though you can't do actual face-to-face. And those efforts will be fruitful, and they'll be appreciated.
No, thanks for yeah, it's good. I think it's being deliberate. You have to be almost, you guys out there graduating have to be overly deliberate. Hey, sir, are you available today at 12:30? Can I talk with you on FaceTime? Just be there. Yeah. Hey, Chris, want to talk to you. What's going on? Hey, sir, just got in. You want to figure stuff out. You can have that open communication via this mean, via cell phone, via however that is to do that. Over communicate is good in this venue. No, thanks, sir. Thanks for that advice. Just go out there. You guys are gonna be okay. Just make that connection. Don't sit on the side and wait. General Pasquarette, I just want to give you the last question, sir. We got about 2 minutes. This one's, it's kind of good. It comes back to Furman's. We talk about, hey, you may not get your dream job out of college. You may get your best first fit. And again, in the Army, we got told where we're going to go. So can you kind of give people advice? And it could be all throughout your career, all the jobs you've had. Sometimes it was, yeah, that's a dream job for General Pasquarette. Sometimes it was, why am I in this job? And you're going to look back years later and say this was there. So can you help the question came in, it's just asking about how do I do good in a job that necessarily isn't my dream job when I go out of college? Sir, to you, about 2 minutes.
Yeah, so I guess in 38 years, I've had probably 20 plus jobs or something, all wearing a uniform. And probably half of them, I'm like, what the heck am I doing in this job? What is the plan here? Because I feel like a fish out of water. This isn't really exciting to me. But in every instance, I can't think of one that I wasn't better for it afterwards, because it helped me grow in ways that it filled gaps in my resume or my my skill set that made me better in the long run. So if you're getting into a job on the front end, and I would say my son, before he got in the active component like he is now, he was in the Army National Guard initially before he transitioned to full-time Army here. And he changed jobs about 4 times. I think he had a college degree and everything. In about a 3-year period, he had 4 different jobs. He liked them all, but and it seems to be different. There isn't like this loyalty, maybe like there used to be when you get your job out of college and expect that you're going to stay there until but now it's very much more transient. So I don't think, if it's not your best fit, what I would say is get in there, and those people, if they feel like you're committed to what they're trying to do, they can help you where you want to be. Maybe that's your best fit than where you are right now. So realize everybody that you work for eventually can help you maybe get to where you are if you're a good part of their team. So maybe just with time, Chris, I'll leave it at that.
Sir, that was probably the best thing you said, because I think leaving the pieces that you're gonna climb that ladder or go ladder or whatever that is, but you can know that everybody in front of you is going to help you get there. And to the job you leave here to get out of Furman, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to be something that's going to help you don't even know down the road, and be very helpful to you, sir. So yeah, absolutely. Well, gentlemen, we're about a minute and a half out, and really, for those that don't know, if you want to get connected, these are sort of our websites. If you got on social media, of course, our Instagram and our Facebook, follow us, go see what we're doing out there. And again, staying connected with us and what we're doing. The Alumni Association, we kind of appreciate everyone being on today. General Pasquarette, Colonel Marshall, thank you so much for both being on, taking the time out today. We understand, sir, thanks for the number. What's the number? 20 jobs, everybody? He's moved jobs, and every time he's like, scratch your head, or how to deal with the boss, or all right, we're doing group me. What is this thing? He's evolved as we have evolved. And same with Colonel Marshall, sir. Thank you both so much. For everyone out there, it is 1:30. We are complete. So if you have to sign off and go to another class, thank you so much. And for everyone else, have a great day. Thank you.